Hello everybody and welcome back to the Apex to Apex podcast with your host, me, Stanley Jones, and we will be discussing once again all things Formula 1 and MotoGP. As the recent weekend just gone was another MotoGP race weekend, we will be focusing on reviewing the Le Mans weekend, and it's fair to say Le Mans did deliver. The weekend was full of thrill from the Friday to the Sunday, kind of dull on the Saturday but very good on the Sunday in terms of entertainment aspect from the Grand Prix itself. As some of you may or may not know, we were also live on Twitch for the Saturday sprint race and the Sunday main race, both races again this weekend, and we'll be doing that again the coming weekend as the MotoGP go to Spain and Catalonia for the next round for a back-to-back race weekend. But in terms of numbers for the Twitch stream, it was a very enjoyable time for the Saturday one and the sprint race, hitting the best numbers we have done, especially live viewer-wise, and interaction in general for Saturday and Sunday was also fun. Fair to say I've been enjoying the commentary. I'm looking forward to doing more going forward, but let's focus on the weekend at hand and what happened itself. What we will mention initially is the conditions, because there was a lot of talk going into the Sunday race that Le Mans weather is going to sprinkle something on the Sunday. Normally rain, which is what Le Mans will do, especially what happened last year when Zarco won, so we expected the rain to hit. The rain didn't come for MotoGP, but it definitely made its presence felt because it did hit heavily in the morning and had the Moto3 race in the wet. The thing is, by the time the Moto2 race started, about 40 minutes after the Moto3 race ended, it already dried up. The track, the sun was really back out. It was overcast actually for the MotoGP race and Moto2, but by then the track had dried. The conditions, not perfect, were definitely greasy, but not wet. It was definitely not ideal, as all the grip built up for the Friday and the Saturday had been washed away and the track was very green. Did this greasy surface play into some of the crashes we saw? I don't actually think so. I thought that initially, especially the ones in turn 2, the Dunlop chicane, but then you go back over the years and you think that's the usual crash spot anyway, so I don't think that actually the greasy conditions played that much of an effect. It would have been more in Moto3, as it was very slippery in Moto3, very greasy. By the time MotoGP came around, the track had kind of gripped up by them. Tricky conditions, still not ideal, definitely not as hot as what the Saturday was. I think the Saturday was near 23 degrees air temperature, so the track was about 37 degrees track temperature, and it very different on the Sunday. I think the Sunday the track temperature was about 22, maybe a bit higher, 25 or something like that, but the air temperature only about 14, 15, so it was a cold day for the Le Mans weekend, but the drivers got on with it and they did put on an entertainment show nonetheless. Would a wet race have changed the order up in MotoGP? Arguably, for sure. I don't think some of the riders could do what they were doing, but at the same time we wouldn't have seen some of the ballsy overtakes we were seeing. Speaking of ballsy overtakes, the one man who was doing that efficiently and better than anyone was the eventual race winner for the sprint race and the Sunday race, being Jorge Martin, what ended up being a perfect weekend for the Spaniard and definitely a championship statement. Once he figures out how to qualify on that Aprilia, he certainly has to be the new favourite going into the race weekends. On the Saturday sprint race, he did qualify in 8th Saturday morning, so as I said, starting the sprint race in 8th place. What we're going to mention initially is at the start of the sprint race, he went through turn 1 from 8th to 4th, from the line to turn 1. By the time they hit the brakes properly at turn 2, he was already in the lead, inside of everyone at turn 1 and turn 4 perfectly. Everyone seemed to be interested in marking the inside, so they were willing to go wide for the exit at turn 1 to cover the inside, the first part of the chicane for turn 2. By doing so, they left the entire right side of the track for Martin, and him being what seems to be Martin before the injuries of 2024 Martin on the Pramac, obviously he took advantage of that, and he was leading coming out of the turn 2 and 3 chicane, and no one could catch him in the sprint race. Since then, he led the entire field for the rest of that sprint race and got the win. Now, all eyes were him on the Sunday race, as he started in 7th due to Marc Márquez not racing. We'll go on to that a bit later. And he remains around 7th and 8th actually for the opening laps, but every lap that clocked on, he was making his way through the field. He was the one you could see he had good pace on him. Maybe you didn't think he'd catch Bezzecchi. It became a bit obvious of 5-10 laps ago he will catch, or he could definitely catch Bezzecchi, but it took him a few laps to get going and pass these one in front of him for 6th, for 5th, but the moves he was doing, I think it was with Di Antonio in a couple of fairs. He had Di Antonio going wide in the Dunlop chicane. They were side by side coming out of the chicane, going down the hill into the right-hander after the Dunlop chicane, after the Dunlop bridge. Martin would down the inside again at the right-hander, going down the hill, had to go wide. Di Antonio would do the undercut, get him back, but Martin would then stick it down the inside of La Chapelle and take the lead on the exits. Not take the lead, sorry. Take the position from Di Antonio on the exit of La Chapelle as he bombed it down to Garage Corner. Overtakes like that, but the one he did to pass Marco Bezzecchi into, again, the Dunlop chicane with a couple laps to go was superb. It was a proper overtake. He wasn't even that close. I think Hodgson screamed on commentary from miles and miles back, and he was perfect on the brakes, perfect covering, so Bezzecchi couldn't do the cutback at the exit, had no answers. Perfect weekend and perfect racing, and just perfect overall by Jorge Martin. Is definitely his strongest weekend since he joined Aprilia, his strongest weekend since he won the championship at the end of 2024, his strongest weekend since his injuries that he had suffered, and he was the complete package this weekend without a doubt. Focus on the championship between the two Aprilia riders now, as they're the statements now in every weekend. Jorge Martin, despite winning 2 now less races than his teammate Bezzecchi, but more sprint races, which is funny. He is now just 1 point behind his teammate Marco Bezzecchi. But bear in mind, I can't say remember and bear in mind, Marco Bezzecchi did win the first 3 races of the season, but he's cost himself points on the Saturday because of that, and now the reform of Jorge Martin, the gap between them is just 1 point. Obviously, you can tell they're kind of dominating the Constructors' Championship, but 1 point between the riders is always tasty viewing for us watching. And I did say coming into the weekend, this kind of has to be the weekend really for Martin to put that statement down. He's been strong the last couple of weeks, and he's been getting closer and closer and closer, but this was the weekend where he can really put the hammer down. As I said, at a track he's won it before, and he did not disappoint with me saying that. He proved me right in a way. I never predicted a win, but I said he'll be strong, watch out, it is his time to put the statement down, and he did exactly that perfectly, and that title fight has now opened up massively. Bezzecchi cannot afford to drop points, Martin cannot afford to drop points because they are each other's rivals, and we do love a little winter team rivalry, don't we? Because that's what will become. Bezzecchi's had control of it throughout this season, but now here comes Jorge Martin. As I said at the start of this segment, once Martin figures out how to qualify the Aprilia, he will be the favourite surely going into the next few races. It's the only thing stopping him now, because I said he started the Saturday sprint race in 8th and started the Sunday in 7th again because of Marquez not taking part. But this is Jorge Martin, who on the Pramac was the 1 lap pace was one of his biggest strengths, so he is a good qualifier. We know he's a good qualifier. It's something with the way the Aprilia does 1 lap that Bezzecchi's got a decent handle of. Not great, because the Bezzecchi did get done by both factory Ducatis in qualifying. Bezzecchi started 3rd, Marquez was 2nd, Bagnaia was pole position, but yet no factory Ducati scored points, and the Aprilia came in 1 and 2. But again, we'll discuss that later on with what's going on with the Ducati, and we'll review actually the positioning in general before we go on to that point. But once Martin does, because I do believe he will figure that 1 lap pace out, he's adapted quick enough this season to this Aprilia. But this is the first time since he joined the Aprilia he's having consecutive races, and he's already this fast, and that's worrying, I think, for Bezzecchi himself. And when Martin figures out the qualifying, he will be a danger for everyone. I think the rest of the field are kind of hoping at the minute he doesn't. We've yet to see Martin versus a fit Marc Márquez on the Ducati. We're yet to see that battle commence, and that's one I want to see. It could happen at some point after Marquez's surgery and his return, but we have to wait and see for that one. Focus on Marco Bezzecchi for a second. The next race in Catalonia this coming weekend is now huge for the Italian, as he now needs to respond, because it's the first time since he's been on Aprilia with Martin as his teammate, where Bezzecchi is now, although he's a point ahead in the standings, he is now on the back foot. Martin has the momentum, Martin definitely has the confidence. It wasn't just a lights to flag victory like Bezzecchi's had at the start of the season, where he led from the start. Lights to flag, if you don't know what it means, you lead from the start and you win. No one can challenge you. Bezzecchi was leading most of the way, even though he said he was surprised to be leading as long as he did. He didn't feel comfortable. Martin had to fight through the pack. Martin had to overtake a Yamaha, which, isn't the most difficult, but Quartararo was doing a good job. A KTM of Acosta, a Ducati of Di Giannantonio. Obviously, Bagnaia in the race kind of slipped out his way for him, but he had to pass him on the Saturday. He passed everyone on the Saturday, actually, at turn 1, and passed his teammate himself, Bezzecchi, on the brakes. If you haven't seen, what a move, by the way, on the brakes. Everything about it is perfect. Even the camera angle, watching them come out of turn 1 into the Dunlop chicane, absolutely perfect. On the brakes, into the corner, put Bezzecchi a little bit wide, but also make Bezzecchi not be able to get the cutback or the exit. That was a hell of a move. And as I said, his battle of Di Giannantonio, I love the camera angle where we're watching them come into the chain, and you just see Di Giannantonio and Martin miss the apex by a mile, and then they're forcing each other back onto the track. Well, they didn't go off the track, but kind of almost did, to reach the apex for the second part of the chicane. It was perfect racing, absolutely perfect. But as I said, Bezzecchi has to respond. Bezzecchi's got no choice to respond in Spain. If Martin gets the better of Bezzecchi again, you will see, I believe, the team momentum switch in that garage for the first time to favour Jorge Martin. At the minute, it's only been Bezzecchi really on the bike, and I think that's fair. Martin missed all of last year, and now is the time to see, does Bezzecchi have it? Can he mentally hold it? As we said, there is 1 point between them and everything to play for now. We've never seen how Bezzecchi can hold it mentally, purely because he hasn't been in this position. Martin has been in the position. Martin was in it in 2023 and 2024. He was unlucky in 23, and he fumbled himself when he fell off. I think it was Indonesia he fell off at. It was Indonesia when he was leading, and that effectively cost him that championship. In 2024, he held it together. He's been there. We know he can do it when he stays on the bike, which now is more and more and more, because he doesn't want to fall off ever again, does he? Of how brittle his body, and how his bones break seem very easily. But Bezzecchi, we have to wait and see. This is the first time we're going to see Bezzecchi under that real pressure. He hasn't yet dealt with the pressure well. If we look at his sprint race performances this year, he does tend to drop it, but at the same time, could that be because it's a new kind of pressure for him? He didn't really fight for the championship in 2022 and 2023. He tried at the start, but then never really come to anything either way. But this is the first time he's one of the main names now in MotoGP, and he has to find a way to deal with this. It's a new pressure for everyone, and the only way you can learn how to deal with this pressure is by being in that position. but this does also focus on Aprilia themselves. As a package, they are the class of the field over a race distance. They lack a bit on qualifying, as you said earlier, but no one can get near them on a race distance. Pedro Acosta tried, Pecco Bagnaia tried. No manufacturer at the minute has an answer for Aprilia, and as we go into the results, the reason why I say no one has an answer for Aprilia, because third place was Ogura, his first podium in MotoGP. Again, like Martin, he had to fight his way back through the field to secure the third place, which is a couple laps remaining as he got Pedro Acosta. Again, a fantastic move. His move was arguably even more perfect, which is hard than Martin's, purely because the way he lined, I love the way they lined the riders up coming out of turn 1 into the flip-flop of the Dunlop chicane. Ogura kind of lined Acosta up side by side with him going under braking, and when they let him in, he kind of halted mid-corner to stop Acosta even trying the cutback, so Acosta had no response apart from to go from the outside, or either just you can go to the outside and try it but lose time, or you have to follow the rider in front of you, and that's the position Ogura put him in. And it was Ogura in the end would only finish the race 0.8 of a second behind the winner Jorge Martin and only 0.4 behind Marc Bezzecchi, so that's how strong Aprilia are now. We'll go a bit more into Ogura later on, but it is the first Japanese rider on the podium in MotoGP since Nagasaki in 2012, and it's the first time in MotoGP era ever, or I think ever really in MotoGP at all, not just before it became the MotoGP era, that is an all Aprilia podium. So before I go into anything else, if we focus on the actual race results, because I haven't actually said that yet, which is quite funny, Martin did win. He led Bezzecchi by 4/10 seconds, as I said, with Ogura in third. Di Giannantonio suffered a crash and quite an awful start on the sprint race on Saturday. He just spun it up and dropped well down the order and then would fall off at the Dunlop chicane, but he managed to get Pedro Acosta on the last lap into the last two corners to beat Acosta by a 10th of a second to secure 4th, with Acosta in 5th. Acosta was fighting the whole time for the podium, but you could tell with about 10-12 laps to go he's not going to hang on. He had the fight with Pecco Bagnaia, who ended up scoring no points after he dropped it from second place. We'll go into that a bit later on, but yeah, Pecco Bagnaia did score 0 points. Acosta was in second for a long period of time, but could do nothing to hold back Martin or Ogura, and in the end Di Giannantonio. But again, it's one of those rides from Acosta where he's frustrating to watch him on that bike, because we know he can be at the front fighting with these leading boys, and he's doing everything he can on that KTM, but the bike is not giving him what he needs, and he's going to become frustrated. The interesting thing here with these two is there's going to be a bit of drama now between Di Giannantonio and Acosta. Di Giannantonio chose to have, he's having a very interesting tactic right now, Di Giannantonio. He chose to have a little bit of beef with Marc Márquez at the start of the season, and now maybe with Marquez out for a few races, he's now put his target on Acosta, because when he passed Acosta with 2 corners to go over the line, he looked back at him twice, and Acosta said he'll remember that. No one passes Pedro Acosta and looks back like that. Well, Di Giannantonio did, and Acosta's remembered it and said he'll get him back next race, so that's going to be a little eye to go to now. Anyway, Pedro Acosta was 5th. Fabio Quartararo is a fantastic 6th place for Yamaha. The Yamaha is an absolute dog. Quartararo was doing God's work to get that in 6th, just within 8 seconds of the lead as well. We'll say where the other Yamahas are finished in a second, and you'll realise why I'm saying he rode like a god, because 6th place, I'm not going to call it a win, because it's not, let's be honest. 6th place is still not where Yamaha should be, or shouldn't be happy with a 6th place, but with the project that is a very good result for them. Fabio showing just how good he still is. And Bastianini, I thought would be quicker towards the end of the race with his tyres, but Bastianini would come home in 7th ahead of Raul Fernandez. Fermin Aldeguer with the one leg, with the other one still broken, in 9th, with Luca Marini in 10th. Johan Zarco, I expected a little bit more from him on the race, but he struggled in the sprint and the Sunday race. He was in 11th, and then we get 16 seconds behind 11th, not behind the lead, 16 seconds behind 11th, so overall 32 seconds behind the lead. You get the battle, what I was calling on the live stream, the battle for the stinky Yamahas. Rins finished 12th, Toprak 13th, Franco Morbidelli in 14th on the Ducati, God knows what he was doing, and Jack Miller 15th. 12th, 13th, 15th. Now you're going to understand why I said Fabio Quartararo rode like a god to get 6th, because he finished, what is that, 25 seconds ahead of his other Yamahas? There's no words for what the Yamahas are doing there. That's where that 16 seconds behind 11th is embarrassing for them. Toprak we can kind of let off because it's his first time, and he beat his teammate Jack Miller, and Rins only beat him by a 10th of a second, so you can't fault Toprak for that, but the Yamaha itself, painful viewing. Of course, we had some retirements. Brad Binder had a crash that I think was La Chapelle, early one. By early, I mean the front one of them. Johan Mir, what a surprise. I was so shocked on commentary when this happened. Johan Mir was fighting. I think he was fighting around Di Giannantonio, maybe Quartararo for 6th, 5th, around there. And I think he just got in front of them, actually. And then he, shock horror, he dropped it. So no points for me, DNF. Pecco Bagnaia. This was the most comfortable Bagnaia had looked in a very long time. He was good on the brakes. He was competitive. He was fast. He was fighting for second with Pedro Acosta. And once he got into second, was maintaining the gap in front of him to then lead a Bezzecchi, and actually closing in on Bezzecchi. It got down to half a second, I think. And then as we went into Dunlop chicane, or midway through the race, Pecco Bagnaia dropped the front, as he has been doing recently on that Ducati. He says they know the reason why. He says it's the same reason why they went off in Jerez. It's good knowing the reason why, but if you're still doing doing it, you clearly haven't found a solution for it. But once again, Pecco Bagnaia scored 0 points, along with Diego Moreira and Alex Marquez, who would fall off multiple times this weekend at Dunlop Chicane. Now, of course, Marc Márquez also scored 0, but as he did not race because of an injury sustained on the Saturday sprint race, we will get into that shortly, as I will name the World Championship standings quickly while I have the page in front of me, because that makes sense to do, doesn't it? So as I said, we do have Marco Bezzecchi leading his teammate Jorge Martin by just 1 point. With that last move on Pedro Acosta, Di Antonio has jumped up to third in the standings on 84 points, 44 points behind the leader Marco Bezzecchi, but importantly 1 point ahead of Pedro Acosta, who slots into fourth now. Ogura's podium has jumped him up to fifth, with his teammate Ralph Fernandez in sixth. That's a Trackhouse Aprilia team in fifth and sixth, which shows how strong that Aprilia is, with all four in the top 6 of the standings. Marc Márquez, despite not racing and not scoring points in the last 2 rounds, is in 7th, still above his teammate Bagnaia, who's in 9th on 43 and Marquez on 57. Splitting those two is the other Marquez of Alex Marquez on 55 points. You don't really need to know the rest because nothing more is happening behind them. Let's go into a very big topic happening right now, and since I've mentioned his name a few times, and you kind of always need to mention his name when you mention MotoGP, it is Marc Márquez. You might be asking, if you don't know what happened, why did Marquez not race on the Sunday? Well, coming into the weekend, Marquez revealed afterwards he was very conservative because he clearly struggling with an injury still. No, everyone thought it was the collarbone, but it turned to be something slightly different. Again, we'll get into that in a second. But on the Friday, he showed no pace, and suddenly on the Saturday morning, Marquez, although knowing he has to go through Q1 as it was 13th on the Friday, and obviously if you're not in the top 10 in practice on the Friday, you have to go through Q1. He turned up in Q1 and suddenly set the all-time lap record. No one knows how. You can see David Tardozzi and Pecco Bagnaia laughing at how he just set this all-time lap record. Obviously, that put him through to Q2. He couldn't quite replicate that lap in Q2, but suddenly you see Marquez is once again, he's on the limit of that bike. That front could fold any moment, but he is taming it as well as he can, as only he can, and he qualified second on the grid, only pipped just by Pecco Bagnaia. And at the top, I think the top 4 in the grid was split by less than a tenth of a second. The top 10 was split by less than 3/10 of a second. That is remarkable to see. It takes longer to say 3/10 than what 3/10 actually is, and you have 10 riders qualifying in that, 10 of the best riders in the world. Anyway, Marquez kind of knew he wouldn't have the pace going into the races, and he was dropping back more and more in the sprint race to about 5th or 6th, I think, at the time. As he goes into the double right hand of the last corner, he couldn't quite bring the bike right off the white line as he wanted to, maybe because he didn't have the strength in the right side, as we found out afterwards, or that's what Neil Hodgson believes anyway, and I intend to agree with him when you watch it. Once he tries to lean on the brakes, these Ducati loses grip at the rear, then grips, then it loses grip at the front, and then it lost grip at the front first, then grip, which made the rear lose grip, and then grip. Doing so, the bike has then thrown him up, or tried to throw him over once. It then tried a second go. He then put his foot down to try and stop it. That get flung back in the air. He then goes over the bike. It's a proper Marc Márquez crash, as he does, because he doesn't crash small. Lands on his head and his shoulder, and you can tell he was wounded by it, and his bike destroyed. Now, the secret is out. He had a scan afterwards, and it came out, that he was not going to race the Sunday or the Catalonia race next weekend, because he did break his 5th metatarsal in his right foot. Now, for these boys, that injury is normal. They can walk that off. What was revealed is Marquez, after the Jerez crash last time out, he went to the doctors and he said something isn't right, I can feel it, and turns out he was right. So when he was saying it's not the bike, it's him, he was no word of a lie, was absolutely correct. And Pecco Bagnaia is showing they have speed by getting pole position and being competitive in the top 3. But Marc Márquez did plan another surgery anyway before this weekend, which is why he was being more conservative, to remove or adjust, I think it was remove, a loose bolt that had happened in his shoulder from a surgery that happened back in December 2019. And when he was in the MotoGP bike position, this bolt was pushing against one of the nerves in his shoulder, which is why he looked so uncomfortable. And not the collarbone injury, which I still think is plaguing him slightly, but it's actually a surgery from years ago which has now come loose and is affecting him. And that's what it was, and that's the reason why he's been so uncomfortable on this year's Ducati. We've seen it all season. Bear in mind, he has still won 2 sprint races in this condition, but this crash kind of he's able to kill 2 birds with one stone by doing the foot surgery. That'll be sorted quickly, and then moving this. And if the nerve is fine, he could be back from Mugello. It's just a triple header. He could be back from the last round in the Italian Grand Prix. If the nerve is slightly more damaged, then that's where the problem becomes more serious. But he never lied about the bike and his condition. He just hid the fact that he has an idea after F what it is, because he didn't want to say it in the media. He wanted to get on with it and kind of quietly do the surgery. With this crash, it's a head of a crash, really. It was a meaty one, kind of forced him into it. I mean, I openly said on multiple episodes now, I had suspected he still had a physical issue going on. I was one who thought maybe it's still his collarbone and something else, because he was, as I said, he was never comfortable on this machine. You can tell by the way he rides what he does with that right arm, and sometimes he's able to do things like a cat that other people can't do, and he hasn't been able to do anything of the like this year because of his uncomfortable positioning purely on the MotoGP bike. He said in normal life and on the motocross bike, this position doesn't affect what's happening, but this time he couldn't avoid it because of the way you sit and ride and lean on these MotoGP bikes. They are different animals, and he has the pain there and doesn't have the strength to do it because of what this bolt was doing. That's now been removed, but it's interesting that he wasn't revealing it to the media, even though it was quite obvious he still had something going on. This almost does reframe the way you've seen his season. As I said, he still managed to win 2 sprint races and be ahead of his teammate Pecco Bagnaia in the standing still with all this going on, which arguably only he can do. But the lap record he set on Saturday somehow is a fantastic lap he did. I have no idea how he did that. And the Ducati qualifying 1-2 before his crash in the sprint race does show the speed in the Ducati bike is there. They just need to be consistent. I mean, if Marquez can get back to full fitness, or as much as full fitness as he can, because his poor body is battered, if he can get back to the state he was in last year, Marquez, again, I stand by it, will be at the front. It's all on his physical condition, and can his body keep up with it? Because Marquez does not crash small, that's the problem. And can a fully fit Marquez compete with Aprilia? Yes. A fully fit Marquez can compete with anyone, and the Ducati is there. It's there and thereabouts. I stand by it. Pecco Bagnaia can't quite do what he wants to do on it, but Marc Márquez, I stand by, would be able to. But with him missing the next round in Spain, that's going to be 3 races at least in a row of 0 points. So you do kind of now, I'm not going to rule him out the standings because of the way points work with the sprint race and the Sundays. You never know anymore. But you still kind of, he's on the back foot massively. I don't think he's actually going to be eyeing up the championship standings at all, purely because of how far behind he's going to be. And I think he's okay with that. I think, again, his focus is again on physical condition, his physical fitness, and he wants to see if he can get to that competitive state again, because that's where he's at in his career now. It's not just can he win the championships, it's can he continue to compete at a high level with his fitness as it is, because as we said, his body has gone through the ringer. There's a statement called "for the love of the game," and I think he's the prime example of "for the love of the game." For Marc Márquez, for racing these bikes, no one will love his game more than Marc Márquez himself. So we'll have to see on that when he comes back, maybe for the Italian Grand Prix. If not, it'll definitely be the one after that, of course, depending on the nerve damage. But let's stay on Ducati for a second. Factory Ducati, that is, as once again it was 0 points, and it continued a season of misery effectively for them, for the champions, because Pecco competing in second and falling off and on his own again. They say they know what the problem is with the front brake, but as I said earlier on in the podcast, they're still making these mistakes, and he's still dropping it in runnable positions. His crash, it was painful to watch actually, because he was leading Acosta going under braking into the dump chicane. Acosta wasn't making a movement in this lap, just following him, and Pecco just lost it. Pecco just lost it all on his own. It kind of, that is the story of their season so far, and it's frustrating to watch for Pecco because we know he's won the championships. But yeah, it is a frustrating watch for Pecco, or for us to watch Pecco Bagnaia. The 2 most frustrating ones probably are him, and as I said earlier, watching Pedro Acosta try and get that KTM in a position it shouldn't be. But mentally, Pecco is destroyed. He's done in that Ducati team. I think we all know it. It's not official yet, but it's going to be. He presumed not to be there next year. Well, the problem right now with Pecco and that Ducati is when he's fast, he falls, and when he's not fast, he's nowhere and falls. So ever since his win in Motegi last year, which again, how did he win that one? No one has any idea. Ever since that win at the end of last year, how many races he finished? I think it's only less than a handful, 2 or 3 races he's finished in that time. And Motegi was in October, so there's still a number of races to go since then, and Marquez raced it, so Marquez didn't race the last 4 or 5. So that's, again, Pecco is not there in the team anymore. And you could pinpoint at what point did he lose belief in themselves in that team? Probably at some point last year. Motegi may have revived that for him, but again, this year has not helped with it's disappointment for the team, for him, for the Ducati in general. It's disappointment with how they are performing, because the Ducati speed is there, but it can't touch the Aprilia yet over the race distance. And it's not just a setup issue, it's not just time management, it's all things mixed into one, and it's a fundamental thing with Pecco on that bike. The interesting thing is here, with Aprilia clearly finding something that Ducati haven't, the strong rumour is, and again, effectively, if you read the reports, it's been signed as not official yet. Pecco Bagnaia is effectively going to be a Aprilia rider next season, as it sounds like he has signed for the Aprilia team to partner Marco Bezzecchi, as Martin will be on his way out. What the rumours say, what the reports say, Martin burnt the bridge last year, didn't he, with the whole contract saga, and now he's coming good. But it does sound like Aprilia have already signed Pecco Bagnaia for next year to partner Marco Bezzecchi, so Pecco Bagnaia is actually finding his way out of the Ducati team and onto the better bike that he's beating his team weekend in, weekend out, which could revive his career, because he needs it. I say, you might think saying revive his career is harsh. I don't, because I think he can't stay on the thing when he's fast or slow, and he can't compete at the minute, so his career for a 2-time MotoGP world champion does need that little injection of revival, and maybe the Aprilia move could do it for him. Maybe working with Bezzecchi, who's a good friend of him, could do it for him as well. But away from Ducati for now, if we focus on the other riders quickly, like the likes of Ogura, Acosta, Di Giannantonio, and the rest of them, after we said Ogura with an historic podium for Aprilia, make it all Aprilia, Aprilia MotoGP podium and the first Japanese rider on the podium since 2012. Usual heroics for Pedro Acosta and a quiet weekend for others. Ogura was fantastic. You can see the last few rounds, Ogura's been coming stronger and stronger and stronger, and what's now another season MotoGP where he's got that rookie year out the way and he can push more. He's got used to these machines more. Tends to happen for the very, very good ones. You can see it every time a rookie comes in, and Ogura is now got the confidence that he can fight at the front. He even smiled, and it's rare for Ogura to show any emotion in his face, but he deserved it after the performance he put in. He was unlucky not to be on the podium, the likes in Koto in America when he broke down whilst pushing for the podium, and the last few rounds he's been there or thereabouts. But with about 15 laps to go, you can suddenly see, Ogura is starting making moves now. Look at the moves he's doing into the Dunlop chicane, and it was to him and Martin were the ones setting the low 31 lap times, low 1 minute 31s, low 1 minute 31s, low 1 minute 31s, and they were both coming. Ogura just happened to be that bit behind. Again, similar to Martin, if he can figure out his qualifying on that Aprilia, he will be a danger in the race and could get a win maybe this year, depending what happens to the other Aprilias. But he needs to qualify higher. Again, he was at the lower end of the top 10, but he did end the 13-year wait, or going on 14-year wait for a Japanese rider on the podium, and he fully deserved it. So Ogura is going to be one to watch for the next few years. Rumours are from where he signed next year, possibly onto the Yamaha, which you're kind of thinking, why have you done that with the state there, and considering you're on Aprilia? We'll have to wait and see if that is true, if that is confirmed, and if it is, that's going to be a risk for him. But speaking of Aprilia, we have mentioned a few times the first ever all Aprilia podium in MotoGP. That's not just a milestone for them, that is a landmark moment, considering where Aprilia were a few years ago. I remember when they came in, they had Sam Lowes on their bike in 2017. They used to have Bradley Smith on their bike, the likes of Iannone, and their bike was an absolute rotter. But they've built over the years. A couple of years ago, they really came strong with Pol Espargaro on it, and they really made steps forward, and now they are the winning machine in MotoGP, and they deserve to be. They've done a hell of a job to get there, and it's a significant journey for them. And it's good to see when teams can do that, because we've been watching them Aprilia the whole time in MotoGP for years now, going on over 10 years, and the whole time they've believed they can do it. They just needed the right, obstacles to be moved out the way. They needed the right solutions, and now they found it, bike, team, and riders. Pedro Acosta, again, I said the usual story. He's the anomaly in that top battle on the KTM, fighting at the front, whilst every other KTM circulates well outside the top 10, excluding Bastianini, who did finish in 7th on the Tech 3 KTM, but his teammate Brad Binder was at the back in qualifying, at the back in the sprint race, and fell off on the Sunday race. Acosta is the only one pushing that KTM throughout the entire race from start to finish in the higher positions. And Bastianini is fast towards the end, but at that point he's lost 12 seconds to the group in front of him. What good does that do if he can't be fast in the first 12 laps? Whereas Acosta is there the whole time on the bike that shouldn't really be there, and to me that's the most frustrating one to watch, because we all want him on that bike that can win, because he will be setting, he is that old school rider. He will be the one creating headlines, because he will be controversial. He will be ruthless on the track. I'm begging to see Acosta versus a fit Marc Márquez, because that will be fireworks. I'm begging to see Acosta versus Jorge Martin in the front, because that will be fireworks. Acosta will take no prisoners, and at the minute he's got to suffer with Di Giannantonio looking back at him twice when he passes him. All respect to Di Giannantonio, he's not quite the star, or not going to be the star that Pedro Acosta is going to become. But Di Giannantonio did pip him in the last corner, which is arguably a moral victory for Di Giannantonio. I did say earlier he's starting to pick fights here and there with riders he's clearly setting targets to. He'd done it with Marc Márquez earlier on in the season, and he's doing it now with Pedro Acosta. The rumour has it that Di Giannantonio has actually signed for the KTM factory team to replace, or maybe to partner Pedro Acosta or replace him, as the rumours also continue to say Pedro Acosta will sign for factory Ducati to replace Bagnaia to be teammates with Marc Márquez. Now that is a team. If it's a fully fit Marquez, give me Marc Márquez and Pedro Acosta in the Ducati all day long. Back to Di Giannantonio though, the rumours does say he will sign for KTM to partner with Alex Marquez, which means Brad Binder could be on the way out. God knows where he's going to go. Speaking of Alex Marquez, the last time out winner in Jerez on the Gresini Ducati, awful weekend for him really. He lacked a bit in qualifying, lower end of the top 10. I can't remember if it was qualifying. I think it was qualifying. He dropped it at Dunlop chicane. He lacked pace in the sprint race, and then Sunday, I think on lap 2 or 3, he dropped it again at the Dunlop chicane. The only dodgy thing was when he dropped it on the race on Sunday, he kept trying to hold the clutch in as they do now, and of course when the bike hit the gravel, it then rotated, so I think he got quite a nasty whack on his arm. But I guess again, it's inconsistency in the Ducati. It's a bit of inconsistency from Alex Marquez himself, and that's something we have seen before. I titled this one on my notes here, Fabio and the Yamaha Miracle, because how the hell he qualified? He qualified 6th in general, or in the top 6. I think it was 6th. on that Yamaha, which I said is a rotten dog. That bike cannot race. It can't come out the corners. It can't go into the corners. Quartararo said he enjoyed the weekend because he was fast, but it annoyed him because he still cannot fight other bikes. He can't overtake them under braking. He can't accelerate them out of corners, so he just kind of stays where he is. But a fantastic pace from him nonetheless throughout the weekend, and he was stunning while the rest of the Yamahas languished at the back. That Yamaha has no right to be anywhere near the top 6, but Fabio the whole weekend was putting it there. He's clearly able to do something differently on this Yamaha than the other guys are able to. But the contrast is the other Yamahas, they're not even anywhere near 25 seconds off in, what was it, a 27 or 26 lap race, something like that. It's embarrassing for the other Yamaha riders, it really is. There's a reason why they've, quietly booted Alex Rins, because he clearly can't do it on the Yamaha anymore. And Jack Miller, I'm surprised, we don't really know. The Pramac Yamaha has no pace. You've got Toprak on it, and Miller, who struggled for the last couple of years in MotoGP. All quality riders, don't get me wrong, and I think Miller's doing the Suzuka race again, the endurance one, which is always fun to watch, but they can't compete with Fabio on the Yamaha. Nobody can, and if Yamaha do lose Fabio Quartararo, which the rumours are it could happen, I do think they are in big trouble, and he's wasted. He's wasted. I was going to be maybe word that differently, but he is wasted Yamaha with someone of his quality, and he's wasted the last few years hoping Yamaha would build this project to work when he signed a contract extension for multiple millions, don't get me wrong, multiple millions a few years back, but it hasn't worked, and he's wasting his best years as a rider. He really is, and his loyalty to the brand is admirable, but also kind of stupid. But nobody saw his top 6 coming. Maybe the French fans gave him an extra boost because it was his home Grand Prix. He had his special livery, his special helmet, but he did not really let them down. Obviously, he couldn't win, but to be within 8 seconds of the win itself is an incredible achievement for him on that bike. Does it change the narrative around Yamaha's development with their V4 project? No, because the other Yamahas, as we said, were awful. We're looking at one rider here, and there's 4 Yamahas, so with the other 3 winning in the back, I think you kind of look more at the rider rather than the project itself. And that will be that, I believe, for the Le Mans review for MotoGP. Le Mans is now done, and it was a fantastic weekend. I thought for MotoGP, every MotoGP weekend is fantastic, really. Even if one race is dull, like the Saturday sprint kind of was, the Sunday was fantastic. So thank you for listening to this episode of Apex to Apex. The big news is, and I've made a decision earlier, that Apex to Apex episodes will not only go out on Spotify, they're also going to go out on the Apex to Apex Pod YouTube channel as well. No video yet to go with it, so you'll see the logo with this audio in the background. Turn notifications on and subscribe to that as well, so you don't miss a single episode if you prefer using YouTube. Thank you again to everyone who joined the Twitch streams Saturday and Sunday. We had the best numbers we've had for the stream, especially on the Saturday one with the, I think it's hard to keep live viewers up, especially on a commentary like that, but to have nearly 30, I think it was 29 or 31, one of them, concurrent live viewers is quite an achievement for this channel, for this brand, and I'm very proud of that. The best numbers to come, and there's more to come with that. We're once again going to go live this weekend with the sprint race and the Sunday race for Catalunya, so make sure you are following the Apex to Apex Pod Twitch page. We are near, I think after this weekend I'll be able to apply for affiliates, so maybe we can get a subscription channel going on Twitch itself. But yes, the Apex handle on that is Apex to Apex Pod, just like it is on Spotify, just like it is on YouTube, and the Instagram is Apex to Apex Podcast. Make sure you are following on that with notifications on. Keep sending in memorable moments and behind the visor suggestions. I do promise when the race weekends are out at the minute it's back to back to back to back. When there's a little gap, we will be focusing on them. Hopefully I will see you again on Thursday before the upcoming race weekend, and as usual I will leave you with the punchline of this podcast, which is the race is just the punctuation. I will see you next week. Thank you.